Hey guys.
Hey! Welcome to another episode of Books and Booze on Opinionated Lushes, where we bring on indie authors, we talk about their current works, and we just let them read a little bit and we talk to them. I'm going to pass it to Dawn to introduce this week's author.
Hey everyone. I want everyone to welcome E.L. Grosvenor or call him Emery, to Books and Booze and joining us tonight. So please tell us a bit about yourself. Where are you from?
How you started writing?
Yes, how long have you been an author? Your birthday, social security number. Just give us it all.
all the important stuff. Huh?
Yeah, all your info.
Well, for start off for the first one, I'm from Midwest Nebraska in the tri-state area. So travel a lot. Family came up from Kansas, just kind of stayed and stopped bouncing around after that. So
Nice.
We're Canadian, so I don't know where Nebraska is.
well, so halfway to Mexico and you'll be in the general vicinity. Just wait till you hit pure flat nothingness.
Perfect.
Sounds great. That sounds like somewhere I want to go.
Just go to Manitoba.
Yeah, basically. Go to the prairies, like Saskatchewan, right there, and then that'd be our Nebraska.
Yes, Saskatchewan is our Nebraska.
Yeah, like
That's
how
the new
Alberta is our
logo.
Texas.
It's on their province sign.
Oh my gosh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna now do. Sonia, write it down for a t-shirt.
That's right. I will.
All right, do you want to tell us about your book?
Yeah. I wrote this book, the Tronis Assignment, as a secondary process after I started writing my first novel, Depths to Come.
Okay.
Depths kind of got stuck on the back burner and held because of just the money involved with trying to do edits and the work and the time. It's not a cheap chore. So
no.
My co-author on that and I kind of decided we'll put it on the burner until we can figure something out. And one of the things I hit on was, well, I can work on something else and maybe help drum some interest up in advance. And that's when I hit on the idea of writing this novella, the Tronis Assignment, as kind of a way to introduce the universe and the characters a little bit beforehand in a small way.
Okay.
Kind of set the stage.
So this novella, it's like a prequel?
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't really hammer directly into the Depths plot. It just carries the same characters and maybe a very minor subplot that explains why things happen.
Okay, yeah. So world building, just a little
just a little bit of world building.
Yeah.
And something high paced and fun.
Well, no, that's cool because we hear a lot from the authors that have been on here that world building is one of the hardest parts of writing. It's not even the writing the word, it's the building those worlds that those characters live in.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool to hear that you're writing on writing through that,
Yeah, just kind of getting the jump start on that. Just the research and study on this has been a process anyway, and I already know after doing this I'm gonna have to go back and fix some things in the other project because it's okay, so that's the science behind that. Whoops.
Well, it's fun to learn.
Yeah, learning's fun.
It is true. And world building, I mean, I'm a DM. I played D&D since 2000.
Oh, there you go, Sonia.
So I learned ways to do it, and just doing it in literature is still a little bit different, at least wise it has been for me. Other people might have an easier time with it. For me, it's still
so far what we've heard is everyone struggles with world building. That's the where people struggle. Yeah.
I don't think I could ever write fantasy or sci-fi just because that world building would just drive me nuts. And then I'd have to remember all those facts. And if I made up a planet, I'd have to remember that name and how I spelt it. And how many suns did I put on my planet? I wouldn't know.
I had an advantage there. The co-author that worked in Depths to Come with me loved the creating a planet and a society and all that, and had all these little note boxes to fill in. So I'm out of town in the hotel on speakerphone with her, walking around the room as we create one of the races that we present in the story. That was a couple of nights, easy way to pass the time.
Yeah, that was really cool.
I think that's how like the best novels would be made. Just like, in a hotel with a ball of like rum and just like, there you go.
That's
you
not the
bang
best
it
anything's made. Is
Yeah.
like how many Stephen King books have we heard where he just did like way too many drugs in a cabin for a weekend, And he came out with art. So sometimes that happens.
Everybody has their process.
Well, like
Exactly,
rock stars have done
exactly.
it too, right? Like they just got really drunk, really high in their hotel room with their band and like produced an album.
Yep, if it works for you, I mean,
Yeah,
more power
whatever
to
I
you.
need to do.
Exactly.
My process usually involves like a panel worth of little post-it notes, and this idea goes here, and that idea goes over here. Where did I put this note? Just
Yeah.
getting lost.
So, you want to tell us our drink words?
Let's see. I would say in this particular case with the section I'm going to read, I would go with either rifle, helmet, or Holt.
Rifle,
Sounds good.
helmet, and home? Is that
Okay.
what I heard?
Holt.
Holt. Okay,
Yeah.
rifle. Wait, hold on. I have
Helmet.
ADHD.
And
Yeah,
I
hold on.
wrote it. I wrote it in a
Rifle,
private.
helmet. Wait, are you
chat.
writing it? Wait, why am I
did.
big? This isn't right.
you changed something.
I didn't press anything.
You
Okay,
touched
we're
it.
fine. We're fine now,
You
guys.
touched it.
Edit it out.
Edit it out.
Good thing I'm the editor. See how that works? That's
Yeah,
amazing.
so-
Did you write it in? Oh, you
I
did.
did. I
You
thought there were
typed it out.
other ones.
No,
so-
rifle, helmet, and Holt. No, we got
Yeah.
it. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. We're good.
All right, whenever you're ready, you
Okay.
can read and I will drink.
We
Well,
will. We will. It's a group activity, Dawn.
I don't care about you. I care about my drink.
I guess to kind of set the stage here, one of the principal POV character in this is a journalist that's traveling with this team.
Okay.
So
Okay.
he's kind of in the mix of things, trying to do some good PR and get a good story that he wants, and everything at this particular point just went sideways. So,
Okay.
all right. John was looking at Andrews since the last message from Second Squad confused and concerned him. He knew things were bad, but he wanted to know exactly what that call had meant. The effect it had on the team was concerning him as well. He looked at the faces and saw grim, almost angry expressions. Holt stepped over and motioned to his helmet. John eyed the communications icon, so it activated and tied him into their network. All right, Newsy, we've got an issue. John nodded. I suspected that with the way you shoved me off with the comm line. He motioned to the others and their looks. Holt shrugged, and he saw that the look she had when he was getting the helmet on. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The situation has changed. Everyone is now a potential hostile. Trojan horse, the sign used when the enemy is changing the terms. In this case, they're using the civs as a weapon. Christ, what happened? Holt only shrugged. Not sure, but it looks like they sent a hostage out to Keith with a bomb. John swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. So what do we do now? Andrews answered immediately. We do nothing. I'm taking your ass back to the command post. John started to argue, but Holt held up her hand. That's not going to happen either. I can't send you two back alone. Who knows what sort of shit they have laying around in the corridor. Keith has already reported they are getting organized. We've lost the initiative. This is now a slog. You two are staying with first. Andrews nodded and shot John a look that felt heated. John supposed it was due to the fact that it meant more babysitting, did he? He looked to Holt, who was offering over a drone, not unlike the one he had sent to watch Second Squad. You're on the drone. If we all get out of this, maybe I'll let you keep the footage. John mildly suspected it had more to do with giving him something to do than anything else. An idle hand was a detriment. That much he had learned. With him on the drone, they all could focus on being in the fight, so he nodded. At the same moment, John felt himself shoved down, Andrew's hand firmly in place on his shoulder as he bounced off the frame of the workstation. He heard the various weapons start going off, the crack of the ballistic guns, the high-pitched flip of the lasers, the telltale whooshing sounds of plasma. Then he felt the bone-rattling feeling of the coil gun. Every time he tried to move, Andrew's hand would force him closer to the floor. John felt like he was going to get pushed through it at this rate. The station floor shook as rounds from other weapons or another hit. His heart pounded in his ears. Then he felt the pressure release from his shoulder, only to have it replaced with the full weight of a person. John looked up as best he could. Andrews was physically fighting with someone. He thought to help, but wasn't sure where Andrews ended and the attacker started. The answer came quickly as the combatants rolled off of him. He took in a deep breath and then saw the attacker was trying to reach for a pistol. John lunged and got his hands on it as the attacker did. They struggled for a moment over the pistol. Then John saw a flash out of the corner of his eye. He looked, instantly regretting it, as Andrews drove a knife into the face of the attacker. His stomach tightened and turned as the pirate's hand went limp and the body jerked as Andrews pulled back the knife. Andrews stood and fired his gun. John's eyes were locked on the other person he just watched die in front of him. You've seen dead bodies before, John, he told himself in a quivering voice. He idly reminded himself that he had yet to see a life ended directly, to be face to face with the person as things simply stopped. He felt his stomach flop again and an acid bile burning way up his throat. The visor in his suit opened immediately, allowing him to puke out onto the floor. Nothing came out, though, just the burn of acid. An eerie calm settled over the area. None of the soldiers called to each other. They just sat silent and waiting. Risking it, John moved his head up and looked around the room. Holt and Eversley were eyeing the corridor Kelly had fired down. He was on the left and they were on the right. Another glance around showed Harrison and Andrews watching the hallway they had come down before the space. When his eyes found Holt again, she was motioning to her helmet. John tapped the side of his helmet, and on his HUD came the communications option. He looked for the one marked for the squad. There were a few beeps, and then a click as the encryption system linked up. Soon enough, he heard her voice over the headset. Newsy, are you up yet? He nodded and gave her a thumbs up. He still didn't trust his voice to be stable. Though he knew better, he hoped none of them would take note. In all truth, they wouldn't care, but he still had some ego. Toughness was still a thing. Well, looks like you're up enough. Her tone was somewhere akin to the same as the joke about him asking Silverling for drinks. It was likely she was smiling despite the firefight. He gave her his best annoyed look. I'm fine. Hey, he managed not to puke. Good. Send your camera down the hall and check the room beyond. He blinked, and then his eyes found the drone controls on the HUD. A glance at the guidance, and he gave it a few waypoints and activated it. He gave Holt a thumbs up just as the feed came on to be shared. Watching the feed, he wasn't sure about the vomit issue. Grenades had made a considerable mess of the pirates in the next area. Limbs were torn off and the bodies perforated by shrapnel. He could see the larger space did little to offer protection from the swarmers and fragmentation grenades. John saw that the various tables and stacks of crates had been placed to offer cover for a fight only to be no match for Gamma's assault. They all laid in random states of destruction. Tables were practically shattered, and crates having large holes in them. Some of the metal was scorched by flame from a blast. Fuck. He wasn't sure he had said it, but he echoed the sentiment. As he was about to close it out, a door slid open on the far side of the room. He spun the camera to see a woman in fatigues with a belt, no armor, and very pregnant stepping out. She was holding a plasma rifle, but not up and ready, more drooping and resigned. As she stepped out, she dropped it to the floor with a clatter and spoke. They're all dead now, she called out in a hoarse, unsteady voice. Holt switched over the PA on her suit and spoke in a calm, soothing tone. This is Petty Officer First Class Sasha Holt of the United Nations Space Corps. What's your name, miss? John blinked and looked over towards the squad leader. It's seldom heard that sort of care in her tone. He felt it would find it soothing, except for the nasty amount of gore in the room. Well, he had to admit that was unfair. She was often that way with the other members of the team. Leanna, the woman answered, her voice soft and distant. Okay, Leanna, who are you talking about? The hostages? There never were any. What? Leanna's voice came back as a shriek. It was a trap. They set this up so we could show that we were ready. The other operators looked at each other. John felt his own heart rate jump up. Every nook and cranny of the space station was now suspect. How many other awful surprises were there in this place? And who were they? John stood up more and looked around. He adjusted the camera on the drone so it was watching Leanna as she spoke, zooming in so she was the dominant part of the picture. Though he thought he should be looking at the rest of the room, the journalist in him wanted the image of the woman confessing the horrible truth of the situation. Holt got on the comms as quick as she could. 1-1 to Overwatch. We have a problem. The commander's voice came back. What sort of problem? Holt relayed the recent development, the room full of dead pirates, and the sudden appearance of a woman named Leanna. Even her announcement. That seemed to be the most troubling of the entire situation. If the people they came to save weren't here, then what were they supposed to do? Who had they seen? John's head spun as he watched it all. The silence on the other end of the line was frustrating. John paced, looking at the room and the bodies from the fighting. He knelt down and looked at a patch on one of the uniforms. He didn't recognize it at all, so he tapped Andrews' leg. What's this? Andrews' voice was tense. What, Newsy? John ignored it. This patch. Is this military? Andrews was leaning against him as he looked at the patch in question. Holy shit. Holt. John briefly wondered if the expression on her face was the last thing people saw when a large predator rushed them. Cold and angry and compassionless. She moved away from Eversley and came over. John had to fight the urge to shriek. He knew she wasn't going to hurt him, but the sheer presence at that moment was intimidating. Gods. Her voice was flat and almost a mix of annoyance and anger. John felt it was safe to press the question. What is it? He asked again, amazed his voice was steady. That's a Cheslin Special Forces patch, she answered. John blinked. Cheslin, as in the Prides of Thyla? Those Cheslin? Yes, Newsy, the ones who tried to bomb Earth 40-some years ago, Andrews snapped. Holt shot him a look and then turned to John. Newsy, I know that you are already doing this sort of it, but I need you to document all of the stuff here. Not like a journalist, but evidence collection. All right? John nodded and set his helmet's camera to snap photos. He and Andrews moved amid the bodies. As Andrews pulled out any paperwork, John photographed it. They worked their way around the room as Holt added to her report to the commander. This time, John smiled. She hadn't shoved him out of the comm channel. As usual, the commander's voice was absent of emotion. The constant professional, he knew what to tell and where to look. We ran the facial recognition software over the girl. She was one of the people from the transport. And if what she is saying is true, that we have a very serious problem. We need intel. Holt nodded, though she knew he couldn't see it. Copy. We're gathering what we can from the bodies here. Secure her and get out of here. Sweep the next area and double check. The machine room should be just on the left side of that area. Might be that they are just keeping the ones who didn't want to play along there. Once done, bring the woman and anyone else back here. Second is getting pressed hard. Clock's ticking. Motion sent the team to work as now more attention went to watching the rear for an ambush. John watched and then changed his camera back to record. He felt comfortable in his job and elected to stay in that mindset, documenting the team doing their work. John looked back at the hall at the same time Holt and Eversley did. All eyes went to Leanna, who was standing there crying. Leanna, it's Sasha. I need you to do something for me. I need you to raise your hands and step towards my voice. Leanna nodded and walked forward. She was looking their way, but her expression was distant. John got the impression she was not seeing any of the area she was in. She sniffled and whimpered as she walked, and when Holt told her to stop, where she was, her eyes widened in fear. You need to take a deep breath and relax, Leanna. I'm not going to hurt you. Neither is my friend. We need to be careful, though. I want you to lift your shirt about halfway up and turn around in a circle. Eversley was watching down the scope of his rifle. The poor girl's hands were a blur. The sniffling and whimpering continued as she raised her shirt and turned as Eversley watched for any weapon or explosive. As she finished her circle, he glanced at Holt and shook his head. Holt nodded. All right, Leanna. I know it's going to be hard, but I need you to put your hands on top of your head and walk backwards down this hall. Her voice shook as she replied, what if I fall? It's... I know. Just look up and walk backwards. My friend will move up and put his hand on your back, okay? Leanna looked at the corridor and retched. She cried again and repeated she was sorry and became unsteady on her feet. Still, she managed to do as told, shuffling backwards as she looked at the ceiling. John watched through the drone camera. When he tried to look around the corner, Eversley leaned against his leg and told him to back up. John glanced down, but Eversley was still looking down his rifle. He explained, dude, I know you're just looking to know. If there's an ambush, it'll happen when we are in that hall. Just wait till I get her back far enough to be out in front of any firing line. John nodded. He had no desire to get shot. Just as he was about to speak, Eversley motioned and moved up the hall towards Leanna, grabbed the center of her shirt. Okay, I have you. We're going to walk back. Once she was hustled out of the hallway, he moved to the side and had her face the wall. John didn't step close, but he moved to see what was happening. As an afterthought, but as gentle as possible, search for weapons, Eversley nodded to Holt, giving a thumbs up and stepping back. John was sure he had heard Eversley let out a breath he'd been holding the entire time. Holt moved over and spoke. Leanna, take a deep breath. Now I need to know what you meant by no hostages. She didn't answer at first. John kept his camera back behind Holt but zoomed in so he could document the scene. The woman's face was streaked with still falling tears and the red in her eyes leaving almost no white at this point. There never were any. Everyone on the ship with me was brought here to train and fight. Anyone who didn't join them, they used as targets. If that is the case, why are you surrendering? Holt kept her voice gentle as she prodded the woman. I'm pregnant, she answered. I came with my boyfriend. After it started, I couldn't do it anymore. I wasn't in the training, but I watched. I watched what they were turning us into. Who's they? Leanna turned and looked at her with a tormented expression, shaking her head against the wall. She stayed silent. Okay, you are coming with us, Holt said. Leanna started crying again, but she did not resist. John watched Eversley tie her hands with crick strips, then the clicking sound, the only noise in the room. He looked back over to Holt, who started to speak. All right, Andrews, McKelly, Hughes, Harrison. You four are on rear guard now. Make sure no one sneaks up on us. Eversley, you, Newsy, and I will check the objective room. We get lucky, and we can get some of these people out of here. John blinked, but before he could ask or protest, Holt and Eversley ducked into the hall Leanna had just come from. He scrambled to keep up, sending his drone to follow with him. The room beyond the hall looked just as bad in person as it did via the drone, and he stopped cold. His eyes went to the bodies on the floor. He was no longer distanced by the camera feed. Here they were in full color and viscera. He had to put his hand on the wall and felt his forehead spin from the copper smell. Searching for something to focus on, he found Holt and Eversley's boot prints through the mess. It didn't help. Hey, Newsy, eyes up here, man. Holt's voice came in like a crack of the rifles. John looked up and gasped a few times, getting his breathing under control. He looked at her and nodded, moving forward to her as steadily as he could. He was concerned about slipping. How did Leanna get through this so easily? He managed to get the rest of the way out of the hall and looked back and forth. Holt and Eversley were moving towards a heavy side door. He used the drone controls to angle it towards the door. Holt gave him a thumbs up, and for some reason, he instantly felt better. There's an air handler, Newsy. Send it through that. Holt just said quietly. John sent the drone up into the air handler access. The vent wasn't overly large, but the drone was small enough to move easily past the bars. With the camera, he could see the vent extending into the darkness. He moved it forward, and after a few feet, noticed a second vent going to the sealed room. Holt, I see them. The computer has positive IDs on 15 people. He said, then winced at how loud he spoke, then mouthed sorry in the direction of two angry faces. Holt motioned him to the side of the room, and then she inevitably moved to open the door. John moved the drone into the position to see the room better. He kept looking at the people laying on the ground or leaning against the wall. They looked as bad as the others, abused and scared. He couldn't focus on that now, so he streamed the video to Holt and Eversley's helmets, knowing they would watch for another Trojan horse. I can't see any of the pirates, he said quietly. Holt looked back at him and nodded. All right, Newsy. Give me a line to the drone speaker. John nodded and set it up. You're on the air. Attention, everyone. This is Petty Officer Holt of the UNSC, Gamma Squadron. We are here to rescue those who have been taken against their will. Everyone in this room is to get on the floor face down and cover their heads with their hands. Anyone who doesn't will be considered a threat. Comply when we'll start moving you out of here. John held his breath as he watched the room. The people were looking around at one another and at the door. Some jumped to run to the door only to be yanked down by another person. Soon, everyone was lying down. He panned the camera back and forth and then looked back to Holt. She was already moving with Eversley and some device he had seen earlier on the door. He was unsurprised when the door slid open with Holt and Eversley slipping in. Still holding his breath, he listened to their voices, his heart pounding in his ears. This was how it felt during his first firefight. Why was he so scared now? Holt's voice broke his mental battle, even bringing his heart rate back to normal in a flash. The journalist's mindset coming forward to document the chaos. So that's what he did. No one move, Holt said as she entered the room. John saw her weapon panning back and forth over the people. Eversley stayed at the door, doing the same thing with his weapon. Holt started to give directives to the crowd. Listen carefully. I'm going to search you one at a time, and then you will go out the door and stand in front of my teammate out here with the camera. John blinked. What did she say? He looked around at Eversley, who gave him a thumbs up. The feeling of cold exhilaration filled his core. Then the rest of her words followed. He'll be running your faces through the identification system. Once you are verified, you will sit along the wall until everyone is out. John searched for a wall in the room that wasn't perforated by bullets or lasers. He saw Andrew step in the room and nod to him. Got your six, man. John didn't have time to revel in the feeling as the first hostage came out. She was beaten and terrified. Her hair was matted to the side of her face with dried blood from either herself or one of her friends. He blinked, then heard Eversley in his comm. Newsy, darken your visor. Put the camera on them and run the program. Ask them the basics, name, ID number, where they lived. Compare it, and then tell them to move them to the wall. John gave the man a thumbs up and did as directed. The program ran, picking out her features and bringing up her file. He kept her ID number on the screen, knowing he'd never remember all those numbers and letters. John asked, what's your name, ma'am? In his best impression of the calm voice he saw the others use so often. Elizabeth Russell, she says shakily. John nodded. Where did you live? 220 Orbital Lane. All right. Go sit down in the corner of the two walls, John said as he pointed. Elizabeth did as he said, and as he turned, the next person came out. He again asked the questions to verify their ID and did so over and over as each person came out. It felt like an eternity, but finally the last one sat down. He felt the heavy thump of Holt's hand on his shoulder. Good work, Newsy. Now let's get the hell out of here, huh? He nodded and suddenly felt tired. The constant up and down was wearing him out. There was more to do, though, and he still had to get out. He moved the drone, scanning the people's faces and getting shots of the team organizing the escape. If he focused on his work, he could ignore the soreness in his body. Holt looked at everyone else in the squad. All right, settle up. We roll out of here and we kill anyone between us and the commander. Got me? Everyone nodded, and the process to move out of the room started. Leanna was placed in a cord restraint behind Eversley and in front of Holt. The hostages were all given directives on what to do. Once everyone was ready, Eversley led them out, moving back to the command post at a double quick march. Rifles were up, aimed at every potential area an enemy could come from. Holt got on the radio. First squad to all elements. Romeo. I say again, Romeo.
Woo!
Woo! That was nice. That was good. There was a lot of like character development in that. Compared to like a lot of the other I feel like a lot of the other just authors that come on and like read a chapter, it's like usually like right into the bit, but like yours allowed for a lot of like character development, if that makes sense. You know, like
Yeah.
considering I haven't read the book, it's like now I automatically am like listening. I'm like, oh, that's what their motives are. I got it. Cool. You know?
There's like a scene and like I like it. It was more my vibe than the other books. They were great, the other one.
No, the other books are great.
Yeah.
We're not dissing. Yeah, like that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, we're not dissing. It's just we're appreciating for what's here in front of us.
Yeah. Man, but using Holt was a drink word. I finished
Oh
my
my
drink.
gosh.
and
I know, and Holt was a drink word. I was like, oh, it's Holt. It's Holt. We got to drink. If
I know.
you want to drink
And then I
with
finished
us.
my drink, and then I started belching, and I was like, okay, I gotta mute the mic.
Yeah, that was my issue as well. I burp a lot. I got a question. Like, what chose the genre you chose to write? I'm always curious because, like, you know, there's so many genres. So it's like, what chose you to decide, like, especially because we were talking earlier about the struggles with world building. You know, it's a struggle. So, like, why did you choose this sort of specific genre to write in?
In all fairness, that one is kind of weird. That's something I ask myself a lot because I mean, I grew up watching the fantasy shows, Conan the Barbarian. I watched a lot of westerns. I grew up
Conan
watching the Duke, and it's like, how did I go from that to like wanting to write something like this? And I think it just kind of spilled off of I've enjoyed sci-fi immensely. Star Wars, Star Trek were again some of my biggest things. And it just seemed like something fun. It's a story that constantly rolled in my head. Is like, I want to write this type of story. Well, I guess it's going to be science fiction. And then I started learning just kind of how broke up the sci-fi genre actually was. And it's like, I didn't stop to think about this. I really you put it in this category and you have fun with it. I mean, even with some of the stuff I've read or listened to, it's like, oh, this I never broke it into its subcategories other than just this is something fun.
Is there a category or genre you'd want to explore that you haven't yet? Like besides science fiction?
Well, I'm already working on a fantasy, but one I have kicked around, and that's kind of due to some recent events that have happened in our town, was YA.
Oh.
Okay.
Some of the stuff my daughter was involved in, I thought would be kind of good, inspirational stuff for people, for kids that heard it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that would be something fun to write.
Yeah, you should.
Have some
That'd be interesting.
positive impact somewhere on something like that.
Yeah.
Well, if you write that YA novel, you're welcome to come back and talk about it.
Just your next novel, you'll just come back. It's just
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That one's kind of got a race at the moment. Writing this caused kind of a chain reaction where the people that have read it so far are like, well, we want to know the rest of the story. I'm like, well, this is what's going to happen next, but I should probably draw the line completely there.
I need to fill in the blanks of in between what's going to happen.
Yeah. So I've got 2 other short stories, short novellas, kind of like this one, that are set and tied into the plot that's going on here.
Where can we find this one?
This you can find on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Smashwords, Kobo, either as ebook or as a paperback.
Nice.
What inspired you to write?
I grew up enjoying writing little stories for like creative writing class and everything else.
Okay.
But ultimately, what really got me writing more than just little short snippets was I was in an online game and I was writing some of the stories just as like filler stuff for the different people in our guild. And one of them asked me, he goes, "Have you ever actually like written more than just this? Because this little stuff that you do is fun. You should look at doing something bigger." And I mean, I had considered it. I just was foundering because I had no idea what to do. We played a D&D session. I had read Dragonlance, figured out the story behind that, and went, "Oh, I want to do that." And that was a train wreck, just to put it mildly.
No, but I think it's great because like a lot of the authors we interview, a lot of it was like, well, someone told me to start writing, and so I just kind of started writing. You know,
It's
like a
important to
lot,
have
like
cheerleaders.
that's literally what it is. It's like none of them were like, oh, well, I wanted to write. It was a lot of like, well, I was already writing for something else, whether it was a game or just
A play.
something in school.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And then they were just like, oh, well, just people told me to keep writing, and so I did. And then voila, you got a book. And that's an accomplishment because damn, Dawn, did you write today?
No, not today. Yesterday.
Well, there you go. See how hard it is to finish the book? We talk about this a lot. Like Dawn is supposed to be our book author, and she didn't finish one book. So good for you.
It's okay. It's a work in progress.
Yeah, it's always a work in progress.
I wrote today.
Oh.
I wrote today.
Oh, you just got called out.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's fine. I call her out all the time. It's part of our
all
joke.
the time.
It's
No,
a joke.
Episode.
Wink. We're being funny. A wink.
Yeah,
No,
I
she's
get
not being
messages
funny. She's
from
on
my
my ass.
co-author periodically the same way.
Do you have any like tips, tricks, like helpful
Advice?
hints? Yeah, helpful advice to like new indie authors?
I would definitely say take the time to study how the process goes. I found that the most intimidating thing, but I found a couple of good resources and followed through and listened to them repeatedly. Kind of got my footing, got my bearings, moved my way forward. I'm still going to admit I'm learning big with it, but don't get intimidated by everybody giving these big bullet points of advice that they seem to think you should already know.
Yeah.
Ask those questions, find a resource that'll guide you through it, and ignore kind of the side babble that goes on. Well, you should already know this. I don't, so. And
everyone's got to start somewhere, right? So to assume that someone knows something already is just ignorant. Yeah.
Yeah, that's 100%.
Yeah. How long does it usually take you to write a book?
Kind of varies. Depths to Come took me about a year to write, but that's also working full time.
Yeah.
Writing is literally when I have a free moment. Working anywhere from 8 to 12 to 16-hour shifts versus 3 kids in the home who all have different things going on. Writing's kind of, I got a few minutes. I'll work.
Yeah, if I got time, I'll get to it. Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's
no, that's fair. Like, I'm actually curious. Like, how do you schedule your time in the home? Because like all of us have kids.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's actually like something we haven't seen with every author we've already interviewed was like, how do you incorporate, like, especially because it's a creative field, you don't know if you're going to make money right away.
Yeah.
Like that kind of ideal, like you want to be able to do what you can do, but you also need to provide for your family, so like that kind of like I don't know how to explain it, but that kind of like purposeful, what you want to do versus what you need to do, kind of workshop when you have, especially when you have dependents. Like, how do you fit that into your time?
A lot of it is I will take advantage. Like if I'm driving someplace, I can kind of run ideas in my head, kind of get an idea for when I do get a minute to type. I'm not
That's true.
creating as I go. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I've got a roadmap. I'm a pantser. I'm horrible at it.
Oh, you're a
I know.
pantser? Okay, I just learned that term. That's so nice. Okay, no, because I learned pantsers and planners. They're different, you know?
Yeah,
Or
I-
And I
plotters.
didn't know that. I didn't know that was a term. I'm, again, not in the writing community. This is new for me. So now I know what you are. Huh, pantser. Okay, but good. Talk to me about your pantsing. Go.
Well then, usually what I do is I'll brainstorm an idea as I've got a free bit of time. I'll kind of run it in my head a couple of times, come up with what it might look like, and then when I get the free minute, I'll type it down. Another thing I do when I actually get like a full solid block of time to write is I put, depending on what I'm writing, like in the case of Tronis Assignment, I threw up a couple of just action films up on the side and just let them play, so that just kind of created that ambience in my head as I was writing, and that helped fill it in and let me live in that moment as I was writing it, I guess. Because I kind of put myself into the idea, what would this look like from this person's perspective? If I was sitting there, what would this look like? And just kind of let it start building and just go. And I don't set a word amount for each section. I just get it till it's there, or I can tighten it up after I go back and edit and cuss at it a few times and ask myself what I was thinking.
Yeah, like I think the hardest thing for me is like the word count, right? Like I'm so worried I'm either under or I'm gonna go over. Like crazy
Like
over.
an
You
essay?
haven't even written a book yet,
I
dude.
just shoot and go. The story's going to take as long as it takes to write.
That's what I say. That's what I said. Okay,
I know that's like a
dude,
weird thing to focus on.
Yeah, it's like
It is.
just
Like,
write
okay,
it.
I
Just
think
write it. If
it's
you're
a zillion
done, you're
different
done.
things.
If you're
I
done,
fell
you're
into
done.
that trap.
If you're
Very
done
hard.
and it's like 100 words, well, good, like great. If you're done and it's like 100,000 words, also great. You know, at least you finished.
Yeah. And that was something I had to be very cognizant of when I started writing Depths to Come, and even when I started working on this as a project just myself. It's not about the word count at the end. It's just getting there. And I even had that problem when I started this, because I looked at, okay, I want it to be about this long, and I gave myself a hard pin number on words. And the more I worked on it, the less important that became, and more just trying to work and focus on getting each section wrote, however long it took. Eventually that word total just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
Especially after talking to the dev editor. That was another thing was a big blessing to me, was talking to that lady and what she helped me fix in the book, and also just the advice she gave me. She said, okay, novellas are typically here to here. Don't focus on that. Just put yours down. Get it where it's at, and we'll find it from there.
You hear that, Dawn?
Yes, I heard that, Jessica.
Okay, I'm just making sure because that's like similar advice to what I told you. I'm just saying. I just said finish the work. We can edit it later. You know what I'm saying? Like just finish.
What's the old saying?
it.
Write drunk, edit sober.
Oh my god, I
Oh
will
my God,
edit
I
it.
should be writing now then.
I know that you picked amazing drink words.
Yeah.
Good for you for being so skilled, E.L. Grover. You really knew how to make sure your audience was highly prepared for your works. So 10 out of 10.
Highly hydrated.
Highly hydrated. Yes.
You know, booze and books. You got the booze part. You knew.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
on the books part.
You understood the assignment.
Exactly. Not everyone does. So we 10 out of 10 appreciate.
Yes.
okay.
I can't think of another question. Sonia, do you have any questions?
No, I already asked my question.
Okay, I always have questions. I always have questions.
Does.
Yeah, no, that's my issue. But we're not talking about me. We're talking about you, E.L. Grover. So sorry to put you on the spot. But okay, you already said you're a pantser. When it comes to writing, was there a reason you chose like a specific genre? over other genres? Like, because like being creative and stuff, like I personally read a lot of horror. So that's why I'm asking, like, is there a reason you specifically picked your genre? Or is that just like an introduction and maybe you'll branch off?
I do plan to branch off, but it's something that kind of strange to me that sci-fi became something I doubled into so hard. And for whatever reason, and I mean, I'm hoping you all enjoyed what I did read.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was good.
But even with some of the reviews I get, people are giving this book good reviews, making good commentary about it. I'm like, I really didn't figure this would be a place I would excel in. I'm the kid that grew up with this and this. I should be writing fantasy or westerns. Why did sci-fi seem to come so well? And I think it appealed so much because I also like those sci-fi stories, and it just kind of appealed, and the stage and the pieces just clicked in together. I liked this essence, this team, Gamma Squadron, in this novella.
So just all your creativity ended up at the right time to
It
create
seemed
the
like
right.
just the pieces kind of clicked in together and went, this is what you're doing, dude.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what you're trying to do. This is what you're doing.
No, I think that's great because like I feel like I always say so if you don't know, me and my husband do music professionally. We did that before the podcast. So we all like personally I always talk about how great art is always built on the shoulders of giants. Like it's always built on ideas of others. It's always built on the product of others, and I just always like enjoy like hearing how like people come into their art and they talk about it. And so like for you being our first like sci-fi author, I was just like curious.
I
I
love
was curious.
sci-fi, yeah. And like you said, like you're like really into like fantasy and stuff, but like sci-fi is just fantasy in space.
Sci-fi is just no. Sci-fi is just fantasy, but real life. Okay, it's just your real life in the future. Okay, it's like no, this is real life, but like 20 years from now.
Maybe
those
50.
subgenres of fiction sci-fi I was talking about. Yeah, speculative fiction versus
it's like a debate that can last for hours, right?
Okay, maybe it's just the sci-fi genre I focus on, but like shit can be realistic, and it's interesting to like it's interesting that people are so creative. You know what I mean? Like, and I am just always interested to hear where that creativity comes from. And so like I appreciate you, E.L. Grover, for being on here, Emery Grocer for being on here, because like you are our first really fantasy author, I think, right?
The sci-fi,
Like,
the first one,
the sci-fi
the first like sci-fi author to like
Yeah.
be on here, and like that's interesting to me, like to really like hear what other people are like create. Like it's world building. You thought of a world. Good for you.
Literally world building, like you
literal world
in
building.
your mind.
You were like, hey, this is my world. Bam. And I'm just like,
Here we
wow,
go.
I'm interested. Tell me more. Like that's interesting to me.
So where can we find you? Like, what are your socials that
Yes,
everyone
socials.
can find your
socials?
where to find you? Yeah,
So yeah, I sent you that link, and then of course I lost my note sheet.
that's okay.
Because
That's
they're all over
fine.
the place. I have let's see, my Facebook page is Tales by E.L. Grocer.
Okay.
You can find me at Emery Grocer on Twitter. Instagram is again Tales by .l. Grocer. It's meant to be a little weird like that, so it's kind of fun.
It's kind of fun. It's purposely fun. We appreciate that. It makes it a little bit more. Yeah, you stand out, to be fair.
There's also my author website is talesbyelgrocer.com. It's got all the links to my social media there as well as my Instagram account is just tied to it. So there's posts on that. That's got my list of current projects, some different brainstorms I've got. It's also got a few very, very rough short stories on it, and they're kind of all over the place. One's very clearly sci-fi, another one's kind of like a medieval fantasy, so to speak, high seas type thing.
So do you release your individual like ideas on there, and then once the book's finished, release it everywhere else, or like how is your release process?
No, those are just little brainstorms and writing practice things. I put a little notice on there saying, "Hey, I'm working on this story. Here's a short synapse about it. Maybe it's what the book blurb will end up being," and kind of go from there. And then with this one, I've got it listed on the coming soon. Here's a link, you can buy it. It's got depths to come below it saying, "Hey, this has been delayed because of things happening."
Life.
Great. Yeah, life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just life.
That's
Life happens sometimes. It just happens. We're pretty experienced in the fact of life.
Like, yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and reading.
I'd have to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, so appreciated, and hoped to have you back on for more of your works.
Yeah, as you release more and more books, we're excited to have you more and more back on, because like Dawn's the smut. But me and Sonia are more like interested in the sci-fi of it all. So that's like we are interested in that part. So yeah,
it's really great.
I have books that'll probably fit both ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just
the
cover all your bases.
I'm working on. One of the characters is a priestess to a goddess of death and sex. So there is
death and sex. I'm excited for this one.
That's the character's way of explaining it to somebody. It's like, all this is a death cult. We just lure people in with sex.
That sounds like a real cult. That sounds like a cult, to be
the
fair.
second you said cult, I'm in. Like, where do I sign up?
I don't know if you know this. We talk about making a cult all the time. You just helped us with our reasoning. There.
our like lure.
Yeah, we're like, it's a cult of death.
It's a book club.
And
Come
sex.
join.
All right.
Thank you, Emery.
Thank you so much for being on our show. And I can't wait to see you again.
All right, cool. Looking forward to it.
All right, thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.